Greetings comic fans, my name is Dominic and today you're tuning in to the Comic Book Report, where we review comic books and graphic novels so you can get an idea of what to read. And today I have another list video for everyone with 10 great Marvel Comics events. This has been an idea I've wanted to do in long form for some time now. I picked 10 of my favorite Marvel comic events I've ever read, and I've made the list just for you. So whether you're a new reader or someone who's revisited these stories over and over again, I'm excited to take you along for the ride. But before we dive in, I just want to shout out our channel sponsor, OrganicPriceBooks.com. If you're looking for comic book collected editions, you can find their link in the description on this video. You can also use my discount code, TheComicBookReport, at checkout to receive $2 off of your order. Please note if you use that affiliate link or the code to make a purchase, I will earn a small commission, but it's a great way to support the channel. Thank you for considering. Now let's get started with today's list. First up, in no particular order, Secret Invasion by Bendis and You from Marvel Comics. This is such a fun little event that I think gets overlooked quite a bit, though recently I feel like there's a lot more people looking for this book and talking about it because of the Disney Plus series of the same name. Essentially, this is the Skrull invasion of Earth. I really thought this was a cool idea. I like the idea that the shape-shifting Skrulls had essentially embedded themselves in the world, kind of replicating different people, and particularly the superheroes of the world. I think right from the jump with that concept, we have so much built-in tension, possibility for conflict, and just sheer terror. It's kind of Invasion of the Body Snatchers meets the Marvel Universe, and there's just some really fantastic moments. There were definitely a couple of times where I was surprised to see who was a Skrull for an indeterminate period of time. I think some of the final conflicts we have with some of Earth's heroes versus the army of Skrulls was definitely very memorable. The art provided by You was just transcendent and beautiful. This is such a fun era in Marvel Comics history, and I feel like some modern events just don't capture some of the magic we see in some of these Bendis works. I did actually review this event book on my channel maybe a month or two ago, maybe a little more, I can't totally remember now. It was definitely brought up to my mind again when I knew that this Disney Plus series was coming. I thought it'd be a good one to review for the channel, and I was really surprised how much I enjoyed this book. I actually remember reading Secret Invasion: The Infiltration, which was kind of a prelude to this book, more than I remember this book itself. But having read it again recently, I just loved it. I do think you can read it as a standalone comic, but if you read some of the preludes, I think it just fills out the world a bit more. There might actually even be an omnibus collection for Secret Invasion, though all I have is this paperback, and I think it's perfectly serviceable for those that are interested in this story concept without needing a ton of filler or prerequisite reading. Definitely check out Marvel's Secret Invasion. Next on our list, Marvel's Civil War by Mark Millar, Steve McNiven, and more. This is one of my first Marvel events that I ever had the opportunity to read, and I just remember when these books were coming out, what a big buzz there was around this title. For me, this is one of the truly epic Marvel events. I absolutely loved it. I think the idea of Civil War, kind of this split between the superheroes we've all loved, it's just intrinsically heartbreaking, and I knew whatever started this tension had to be grounded in something real. And it really was. This really kicks off after a kind of terrorist attack and a kind of superhero intervention gone wrong that basically leaves so many killed. Essentially, after this event, the governments kind of decide to create something called the Superhero Registration Act that really requires the superheroes to be regulated by governments while also submitting their secret identities for essentially public release. This really divides our heroes, some who believe this is an infringement on freedoms, and having a government regulatory committee just opens it up for kind of corruption rather than having these kind of freelance heroes that just kind of go where they need to go. Also, the aspect about revealing secret identities, there's some heroes that they don't want to jeopardize their family and loved ones by doing that, and I think it's really valid. So you really just ideologically can see both sides of the argument. For the side against the Superhero Registration Act, we have Captain America, and the one for the Registration Act, we have Tony Stark, Iron Man. So those are kind of the generals of both sides of this Civil War, and under them we have so many of our beloved heroes. But it's really interesting to see where the lines are are divided. There's some that make absolute sense, and some that are really surprising, but I think in really believable ways that left me just at the edge of my seat. We also have people defecting from one faction to another, we have this decision splitting families, and there are just so many implications that by the end of this book, you're left just absolutely jaw-dropped. It's really, really well written by Millar, and it's just generally an event I'm always going to remember. Next up, The King in Black by Donny Cates and Ryan Stegman. This is definitely a more modern Marvel event, but for me, it was one that really stood out. I absolutely love the art we have from Stegman, and I think the whole concept of The King in Black was definitely fascinating. Being a longtime Spider-Man fan and Venom fan, this was a culmination of a lot of storytelling that I think just paid off really well. Admittedly, I haven't really made my way through that Donny Cates Venom run, which this acts as kind of a cap for, but even just as a long-term fan of these characters, this is such a great standalone event. I am aware again that there's an even greater payoff should you have read the Donny Cates Ryan Stegman Venom run. I know this is included in that omnibus and that there's also a King in Black omnibus that has this event along with a bunch of tie-ins, but I'd also just like to say the standalone event, this trade paperback, can absolutely be read as a standalone. In fact, that's the way I did it, and I didn't find myself all that confused, and I think that it had a really solid beginning, middle, and end. A really good story arc here that really incorporates a lot of the Marvel Universe, the Marvel heroes, especially on that Venom side of the Marvel heroes spectrum. I do think that this is really a standout. It's a little bit darker than some Marvel events, so for some people that don't like their books, maybe a little bit over violent or over just dark, this might be one to avoid, but I think that those that like Marvel stories a bit edgier, this is a must-read book. Like I said, I really enjoyed it. I think we got some really good character development with Eddie Brock. I think that I cared for him more in this book than I have in a lot of other Venom books and products out there. It really was just masterfully done, and it's one that really will stay with me. I'm curious to see how it holds against the test of time, but I know for me, I really enjoyed this one. And hey, while you're watching, if you're enjoying this video and you also like comic book reviews, unboxings, shorts, and more, definitely consider subscribing to my channel, The Comic Book Report. You can even hit that bell icon so you're notified every time I drop content. Thank you for considering, now on with the show. Next on my list today, and possibly the most polarizing, X of Swords by Jonathan Hickman and more. This is the first big Krakoa-era X-Men crossover event, and for my money, it was such a great payoff. I really enjoyed this book. It was not a perfect event, but I heard almost unanimously negative reviews for the book, but having read it myself, I was blown away by how much I enjoyed it. No, it's not perfect. Yes, it might be a little bit over-bloated, but I think if you have it in a collected edition, like this paperback here, or if you were fortunate enough to get the oversized hardcover, well, frankly, it's just a fantastic read. It's an over 20 issue comic book crossover that has so many of the different X titles at the time, along with a couple one-off issues that lead into this event itself. I know that this era for X-Men and the general X titles has been a bit of a pain to collect as far as the mapping and making sure you get pertinent issues where. But again, if you get the collected edition, this is such a fun event. It definitely leans into the more fantasy elements of the X books. This is really Excalibur based as far as that title goes. We have Saturni sort of in the Starlight Citadel, set a tournament between the mutants on Krakoa and those in Arakko, and essentially it's like mutants versus mutants. There's basically these swords that have these special abilities, and there's these chosen ones who are going to wield the swords, and those basically give you invitations into this crazy tournament. So this event's actually divided almost in half. The first half is kind of the setup and finding the swords and those kind of drafted to basically fight in this tournament, and the second half is basically the tournament and battles themselves. And it's just a really fascinating book. I was so surprised to see that this was the first event they chose to do in this Krakoa era, but I again thought it was a ton of fun. It showcased a lot of my favorite mutants, it added some interesting concepts to this overall Krakoa lore, and I just thought the art was beautiful throughout. I think with all of these different creators and all of these different titles collected in this book, I was pleasantly surprised to see the amount of cohesion we got in this collected edition. I think more people are sleeping on this than should be. Definitely recommend. Next up, of course, Jim Starlin's Infinity Gauntlet. This is the early Marvel Cosmic era, and for my money, it's one of the greatest standalone Marvel events. There is some prelude material leading into this. I know there's an Infinity Gauntlet Omnibus as well, and I know this spins out into the Infinity War and Infinity Crusade, but this book, the Infinity Gauntlet itself, can absolutely be read as a standalone. If you're a fan of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, this book obviously served as the basis for the grand story arc that followed Thanos and the Infinity Stones in that film universe. There's a little bit of differences, obviously, with the comic books, but there's such a rich story here. Thanos is on full display for fans of that character, and we get to see a handful of really awesome Marvel Comics characters. I know for me, we have some that weigh a little bit more as far as their importance with this book. One of my favorite characters, the Silver Surfer, is one of the primary characters in this story arc. It's certainly memorable, and I think it does a fantastic job at not alienate those readers who are fans of the more New York-based superhero fare rather than just the otherworldly cosmic side of the Marvel Universe. I actually think Infinity Gauntlet is almost a perfect blend of both aspects of the Marvel Universe in one. I think that you can get so much out of this book, even to this day, even though it was written some time ago. The art and the narrative style is a bit dated, but I still think it's very fresh, and every time I revisit this book, I get a little something more out of it. I love the Infinity Gems, the Infinity Stones, depending on if you like the movies or comics. I just like Thanos here. This is some of his most iconic moments in the comic books, and I think that, again, this should absolutely be included on any list that has Marvel events in the title. I had to include it, especially for fans of the MCU. If you haven't yet read Infinity Gauntlet, definitely go pick up a copy. It's absolutely worth your time, and it's something that's so important to Marvel history. Another really important Marvel book, of course I'm talking about Jonathan Hickman's Secret Wars. This book came out in, I believe, 2015 and completely rattled the Marvel multiverse. This is known as the event that kind of has the Ultimate Universe and the regular 616 Marvel Universe collide. We have a lot of fun homages to the original Marvel Secret Wars from decades back, but it's really just freshly done. And for my money, this was definitely a lot more entertaining and surprising than I expected it to be from the story's outset. Without spoiling too much, a heavy character in this book is definitely Doctor Doom. So if you're a fan of the Fantastic Four, particularly Jonathan Hickman's tenure on that book, if you're a fan of Doctor Doom, if you're a fan of the Avengers, if you're a fan of the Marvel Ultimate Universe, this is a must-read chapter for you, a must-read Marvel event. It's one of my favorite Marvel events I've ever had the pleasure of reading. I just think it was really just wonderfully done. It has a truly epic scope, but the storytelling feels well-paced and intimate at the same time. I have no idea how Hickman does it, but that is absolutely one of his strengths as a comic book writer. I know I saw it in Fantastic Four, and I've seen it with what I've read of his Avengers run, which, by the way, Secret Wars also serves as sort of the culmination of his Avengers era. In fact, like the way King in Black kind of caps the Donny Cates, Ryan Stegman run, this book also caps the Avengers by Jonathan Hickman era, and there's so much kind of connected material as well to his Fantastic Four run. So again, if you're a fan of Jonathan Hickman's stuff at Marvel, you have to read Secret Wars. It's definitely a great swan song, it goes out with a bang, and it is truly memorable. They also do a lot of really key things with the character of Miles Morales' Spider-Man, but again, I don't want to get into too many spoilers here. I did review this book on my channel as well. You can definitely seek it out if you want more information, but this was a really big high recommend for me. I know the MCU now is trying to lead up to their own Secret Wars, so I think that it's going to be heavily based on this run from Jonathan Hickman. I say heavily, maybe minorly based on it in the same way comic books are adapted by the MCU, but at any rate, a fantastic read. Next up, Marvel Superheroes Secret Wars. So, if you saw my last entry, this is kind of the first Secret Wars that Marvel produced. There's a lot that Jonathan Hickman drew from this initial event series, but I think that this should still absolutely be read. It is a little bit dated. I think it came out in the 80s, but it's such a fun one. This series was written by Jim Shooter with art from Mike Zeck. I have the Omnibus here. They reprinted this not too long ago. You can definitely check Organic Price Books if you're looking for a copy. They might still have some in stock. Essentially, this takes our heroes and villains from the Marvel Universe, kind of a dozen or so sampling from each side, to a kind of created planet called Battle World that is sort of a hodgepodge patchwork planet on which these characters should all do battle. They've kind of taken here by this unseen figure known as the Beyonder, unseen at least during this run. Essentially, he says, destroy your enemies or something and I will grant you a wish, is essentially what it boils down to. So it's just this ultimate battle between good and evil, but I think with that I was really surprised to see some of the nuance that Shooter had in this book. There were definitely different factions even within the good and evil side of this group that I thought was fascinating. This was also known to provide Spider-Man with his symbiote suit that would one day become Venom, so it's really historic in the history of the Marvel Universe. It also shakes up things in a lot of different comic book runs like the Hulk, X-Men, Fantastic Four, and more. I don't want to get into too many spoilers here. I actually did review this one on the channel as well recently, but this is really a fun book. I think if you like 80s comics and you haven't read this somehow, you have to do it. One of my favorite factoids about this book as well is that it was created because they were trying to create a line of toys. And with this created as such a blatant merchandising opportunity, it is even more fascinating and impressive just how good this run is. It's such a fantastic event that I don't want to see people miss out on. So happy I revisited it. You can still find it for a pretty affordable price, at least at the time of the recording. A good recommendation from me. Next up, we have Marvel's Annihilation. I have it included in this omnibus here. Annihilation is the beginning of the modern cosmic Marvel saga, and wow is this book impressive. It's basically made from a couple random issues, but really 4 small mini-series that culminate in the actual Annihilation event itself. And those series include things like Drax the Destroyer, Silver Surfer, Nova, the Super Skrull. Basically, there's all these just different parts of the cosmic Marvel universe who are all affected by this thing known as the Annihilation Wave, which is sort of this gigantic plague of annihilus-like insectoid robots that is sweeping through the universe and kind of destroying everything in its wake. And unlike a lot of the other, again, kind of New York or global-based Marvel adventures, this one is a pure cosmic adventure, taking place in kind of, again, cosmic Marvel, interstellar space travel kind of Marvel. The implications on this are universal-wide, galactic-wide, not just your neighborhood in New York. I think there is such a real sense of stakes here. We get to see a lot of just lesser-known Marvel characters really shine, and I really feel like the creators were able to play in this sandbox with a greater degree of artistic freedom, as they didn't really touch a lot of the A-list characters of the time. I imagine there might have been more editorial restrictions if they had tried to play with characters such as Spider-Man, but because they're dealing with kind of tertiary, third-string Marvel cosmic characters, we have just such an amazing burst of creativity. We have a lot of just triumphs and loss and grief, and it's just a really fascinating saga. Like I said, it really kicks off a whole new era for cosmic Marvel events, but as a standalone event book, especially with these miniseries tying in this one omnibus collection, this is a truly memorable book, and I think if you're a fan of things like science fiction, this is a must-read book for you. There's a lot of different art styles throughout the different series in this Annihilation Omnibus, but wow, I enjoyed just about everything I've read from this book. Next up, we have what I think might be the largest omnibus in my collection, Avengers vs. X-Men Omnibus. This is a massive event that has so many tie-in comic titles, but I'm going to be speaking primarily about the actual Avengers vs. X-Men event itself, which you can find in different hardcovers, paperbacks, digital, single issues, things like that. There again is so many other great tie-ins to this book that are all included in this Avengers vs. X-Men Omnibus, but as far as the event itself goes, I think it's a triumph. I think that a lot of people overlook this book for a modern Marvel event, but I think that it's so much fun. There's so many great creators attached to this, one of my favorite being Brian Michael Bendis, but essentially it is what the title suggests. This is the Avengers fighting the X-Men, and some of those lines aren't so clear when some X-Men members are part of the Avengers. I think that this is such a great book. It has a kind of Civil War feel in the way that it draws the lines for some of our heroes, and it's also a really great bookend opposite something like House of M, which kicked off this sort of endangered species era for Marvel's mutants. This one is sort of on the other end of that spectrum. We have kind of the next step for the mutant race kind of at stake in this book. The whole event is basically based around the upcoming return of the Phoenix Force to Earth. Everyone in the cosmic Marvel space basically is alerted that the Phoenix Force is returning to Earth, and the belief is that this is going to usher in the next generation of mutants on Earth. It's going to fix a lot of the mutants' problems. But the Avengers believe that this is a planet-wide and more threat and must be neutralized, versus a lot of the X-Men, headed by Cyclops, really believe that no, this is the next step for the mutant race. This is absolutely needed. This is like kind of the breakthrough we've all needed. And it's just a really epic storyline. There's a lot of just betrayal, sadness, hope, joy, and a ton of just amazing fights. There's a lot of great twists and turns and spoilers that I'll try not to give away here. Suffice it to say, it should absolutely belong on a list of great Marvel events. Last on our 10 great Marvel events list, but certainly not least, the House of M. I have mine collected in the House of M Omnibus here from Marvel Comics. I had a chance to review this on my channel not too long ago as well, but for me, this is one of my favorite Marvel events of all time. Like Avengers vs. X-Men, this book I'm going to be talking about mostly the event itself. There are a handful of tie-ins that again are all included in this House of M Omnibus, but they really don't affect the overall storyline of the House of M event as much, like you have with something like X of Swords, where every issue from the different books tells the next part of the overall story for the event. No, this is really the event itself and a bunch of tie-ins that just happen to happen during the events of House of M at different parts within the Marvel Universe. At any rate, House of M basically creates a false or different world within the Marvel 616 universe where the mutants are suddenly the superior race on the planet. We have humanity being kind of the endangered species, the subclass social group within the world, and we have the world being basically run by Magneto and his family, the House of Magnus. Interestingly enough, almost none of the Marvel heroes have any memory of the world being any different than the world as seen during this House of M universe. That changes one by one throughout the flow of the event itself, and essentially it boils down to Earth's heroes trying to turn the world back to the way it was. It's a really great book. I think it's definitely X-Men heavy, but we still have a lot of fan favorite Marvel superheroes involved. And like I said, this actually kicks off a whole new era for the X-Men titles, the mutants in general within the Marvel Universe, that at the other end of the bookend we have Avengers vs. X-Men, which I spoke about earlier. A really great book. I just had the opportunity to reread this, as I said, and it was even better than I remembered it. I think every Marvel fan out there deserves to read House of M. It's really such a great book. I absolutely loved it. A great event that I'll always remember. And that's going to do it today for our 10 great Marvel Comics event books. I absolutely love just about every title on this list. There are so many other great Marvel event books out there. In fact, if yours didn't make my list, definitely comment and let me know what I'm missing out on. Let me know what some of your favorite Marvel event books are. Even if they were on this list, tell me why you like them. Tell me why they're memorable, why they stand out. Maybe you don't like event books in general. Maybe you're not a Marvel fan. Let me know about that in the comments too. Maybe you have recommendations for DC events I can take a look at. Other than that, definitely let me know what you think in general about list videos like this. I've had such a blast making these videos. I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you so much for watching. It means a great deal to me. And until next time, this has been the Comic Book Report. Please don't forget to leave this video a like and maybe check out one of my other videos. Until next time, have a good one.